How to do that? Let's talk about urbanisation again, but this time we're going to compare Australia to the US. All right. So you're going to know how Australia and the US compare on the topic of urbanisation. How many people live in their cities? How big are their cities? Yada, yada, yada. And you're going to be able to interpret a map. I'm going to show you a map of the world's megacities at the end. And you're going to answer some questions about it. Right. Copy that table down. So, the urbanisation rate is higher in Australia. More people live in cities as a percentage. The USA's got 10 cities over 1 million. Australia's got 5. That's quite impressive considering that US is 10 times bigger than Australia in terms of its population. And look how concentrated our population is. 40% of all Australians live in just 2 cities. In the States, the 2 biggest cities, New York and LA, only 10% of people live in those 2. So there you go. We are more urbanised and particularly squashed into Sydney and Melbourne. What has that meant? It has meant disease spread, which we'll get to. Here's an interesting little map. Check it out. That's Australia compared to the US in size. So it's about the same size. Here's another map showing the same thing. Just it's more googly. Get excited because other than that table, there's very little writing to do in this lesson. And here's some more. What are the causes of people moving to the city? Less farm workers are needed because of technology, right? You used to need heaps of people to do farming, but now we've got tractors and drones and giant irrigation machines. Yeah, that's why we don't have lots of people living in the country, because they don't need to. And all the jobs are in the cities now, like factories. But probably more true for the modern world are service sector jobs, retail, teachers, yeah. Service jobs are the biggest and growing source of employment. So yeah, there are 2 reasons why the countryside is clearing out. We don't need lots of people to live there to farm. There's more jobs in the city. Check it out. There's some farm technology. Yeah, he's doing it with a drone. Sweet. There, look. So they moved to the city to work in the factories. Got pictures showing my stuff. Okay, so we've talked about the causes of urbanisation. What are the consequences? What are the effects? We have conurbations, which is when cities get so big they join together. Even in Melbourne, you used to be able to go to St Kilda for the weekend on a holiday. It didn't used to be part of Melbourne, but now it's just a suburb in Melbourne. I reckon Melbourne and Geelong will eventually be like one giant megacity. You'll see. Mark my words. There's also an increase in homelessness in big cities. And this is a very surprising stat. I was not aware of this. There are 3 times more homeless people in Australia as a percentage than there are in the US. Shocking. Cities breed disease. Look at the recent pandemic. Which places got hammered the worst in Australia with COVID? It was Melbourne and Sydney, those 2 massive cities where 40% of us live. There's also a lot of pollution in cities from cars and from factories. But, interestingly, per person, you have a smaller ecological footprint if you live in a city than if you live in the country. Think about why. You live on smaller space than people in the country. You're more likely to be able to take public transport. People who live in the country have to drive everywhere. So they're burning petrol. Right, let's have a look at a couple of maps. That is a couple of the conurbations. We've got one between Sydney and Newcastle. It's not actually the greatest map, is it? There's a conurbation, yeah, these things are all linked. And here again, the Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, Brisbane, there's like a thin layer of city between all of them. So there's a conurbation there and there's a conurbation there. They are really Australia's 2 big conurbations. What about in the States? We were comparing, weren't we? So there we go. These are called mega regions. They've got a lot of conurbations. So here you've got like Southern California has Los Angeles and San Diego. There's a lot of city between the 2 of them. Over here, this is probably the biggest conurbation, I would say. in terms of population in the States. You got New York City here, you got Boston, you got Washington DC, Philadelphia. You can take a train from here to here, and if you look out the window, you're just looking at city the whole way. When I say city, it doesn't necessarily mean like skyscrapers. I mean like houses. Yeah, okay. Activity time. Sweet. I can fit my head under that map. There is a map of the world's megacities and how this statista has calculated that they might grow. It was created in 2011 and it estimates population for 2025. My first question is, what time span is shown in this map? Hint. What was the biggest city in 2011? What will be the biggest city in 2025? What city will add the most people? So I just want what city will add the biggest number of people? And a separate question, and these probably won't have the same answer. What city will increase in percentage the most? And quite handily, they've told you the percentage there, so you can just figure out which one of them is the highest. And finally, again, let's practice using geographic language. Using geographic language, north, south, east, west, inland, coastal, describing continents, countries, and so on. Describe where most megacities will be in 2025. Let's watch a video called Urbanisation and the Future of Cities. Fun.
Today, more than half of all people in the world live in an urban area. By mid-century, this will increase to 70%. But as recently as 100 years ago, only 2 out of 10 people lived in a city, and before that, it was even less. How have we reached such a high degree of urbanization, and what does it mean for our future? In the earliest days of human history, humans were hunter-gatherers, often moving from place to place in search of food. But about 10,000 years ago, our ancestors began to learn the secrets of selective breeding and early agricultural techniques. For the first time, people could raise food rather than search for it, and this led to the development of semi-permanent villages for the first time in history. Why only semi-permanent, you might ask? Well, at first the villages still had to relocate every few years as the soil became depleted. It was only with the advent of techniques like irrigation and soil tilling about 5,000 years ago that people could rely on a steady and long-term supply of food, making permanent settlements possible. And with the food surpluses that these techniques produced, it was no longer necessary for everyone to farm. This allowed the development of other specialized trades and, by extension, cities. With cities now producing surplus food as well as tools, crafts, and other goods, there was now the possibility of commerce and interaction over longer distances. And as trade flourished, so did technologies that facilitated it, like carts, ships, roads, and ports. Of course, these things required even more labor to build and maintain, so more people were drawn from the countryside to the cities as more jobs and opportunities became available. If you think modern cities are overcrowded, you may be surprised to learn that some cities in 2000 BC had population densities nearly twice as high as that of Shanghai or Calcutta. One reason for this was that transportation was not widely available, so everything had to be within walking distance, including the few sources of clean water that existed then. And the land area of the city was further restricted by the need for walls to defend against attacks. The Roman Empire was able to develop infrastructure to overcome these limitations. But other than that, modern cities as we know them didn't really get their start until the Industrial Revolution, when new technology deployed on a mass scale allowed cities to expand and integrate further, establishing police, fire, and sanitation departments, as well as road networks and later electricity distribution. So what is the future of cities? Global population is currently more than 7 billion and is predicted to top out around 10 billion. Most of this growth will occur in the urban areas of the world's poorest countries. So how will cities need to change to accommodate this growth? First, the world will need to seek ways to provide adequate food, sanitation, and education for all people. Second, growth will need to happen in a way that does not damage the land that provides us with the goods and services that support the human population. Food production might move to vertical farms and skyscrapers, rooftop gardens, or vacant lots in city centers, while power will increasingly come from multiple sources of renewable energy. Instead of single-family homes, more residences will be built vertically. We may see buildings that contain everything that people need for their daily life, as well as smaller, self-sufficient cities focused on local and sustainable production. The future of cities is diverse, malleable, and creative, no longer built around a single industry, but reflecting an increasingly connected and global world.
Our reflection activity today is a SWOT analysis. So thinking about megacities, that's a city with 10 million or more people living in it. Copy and complete that table. You don't need to write all this, carry on. That's just to help you. I want you to give me one strength of megacities, one weakness of megacities. What's one opportunity that we might have with megacities, and what's one threat of megacities? Come up with at least one dot point for each of the 4 categories. Yeah. Thank you. Keep it real.